Let's go! Gator! Gator! It's gonna be a football game tonight now. No doubt. It's gonna be a football game here. Okay. I done been here before. All right, let's go, baby.
9. Rushing 4, ball comes out of the hands of Newton. It's on the ground, and it's still on the ground. Picked up by T.J. Ward at the 4-yard line. Vaughn Miller did it again.
Alabama back on top of the college football world.
Ladies and gentlemen, football to the max.
Your host, Sean Garmer, Gary Vaughn, and Randy Isbell.
Hello and welcome to another Football to the Max, and this is our final preview that we have to do. Randy, I think your fan is really loud.
All right, I'll turn it off.
At least I think that's what it is. I just noticed it for some reason. Sorry. I haven't got myself. Yes, we're doing the SEC today on this show. And that'll be it. We're done with previews as far as having actual people that we interviewed. The Thursday show is going to be interesting. We're going to just do, probably unless we can find something to do football-wise, or I mean not football-wise, NFL-wise, it might just be a college edition where we just preview the first week. Since we have lots of awesome games to talk about and preview and give predictions for, and we'll talk about our confidence points and all that. But, Gary, we had our first fantasy draft, of course, something that, Randy talks about all the time on his Fantasy Football to the Max show that you should go check out, by the way. So we had to use Randy's, did you use any of Randy's advice in practice with your, the WTM League draft?
Well, yeah, people should go check that show out. And yes, I did. I looked at a few guys, and I kind of thought to myself, okay, this is what, of course, these guys over at Fantasy Football to the Max are talking about. Do I like this? Do I not? And I didn't take their advice on my first pick, but for a lot of the other ones, I did. I believe you guys, Randy, were talking about Deshaun Jackson being a guy to look at. I know you all talked about several other guys, Derrick Henry. So those were a few choices I made. Alshon Jeffrey ended up on my team. So a few of the guys that they had talked about were definitely a big help. And I was excited. I mean, there were a few moves and changes in the league that, you got to keep up with. And these guys kind of refresh my memory. And it definitely helped. So people need to go check out that podcast before you do your drafts. It's definitely a big help. It's like having your own guide right in front of you just by listening to it.
Yeah, I kind of went in a different direction than I normally do. So I'm hoping that doesn't mean that I'm not going to at least make it to the playoffs like I have been for the past couple seasons. I went running back heavy instead of receiver heavy because the running backs were sort of going fast. So we kind of had to go there, and then I picked Adrian Peterson, and then I had Le'Veon Bell sitting there, and I was like, well, do I pass him up to go to somebody else? And it's like, I don't know if I can pass that up, he's going to be gone probably the next round. And then I was able to get DeMarco Murray too, so three-headed rushing attack that I hope works out after the first week. And yeah, just went in some different direction than I went. Like, I never drafted Eli Manning, and I drafted him this time. So, hoping that works out. It's going to be interesting for me this season. Have you had any drafts yet, Randy?
Yeah, we had the 14-teamer a couple weeks ago. My main league is this Sunday that I'm prepping for. I don't want to talk about my 14-teamer. I mean, you ever want to have a draft just kind of fall apart on you? Mine did so fast. I had the first pick, took Antonio Brown, have to wait 26 picks before it's my turn. And it comes back around finally, and I'm looking at who I'm going to take for my wraparound, and Brandon Marshall and Matt Forte are both there. I'm like, okay, I want one of them. Okay, I think they're both going to be big Jets supporters, and I think DeMarco Murray was the running back that I really wanted at that point. So I had it in my head, okay, I'm going to take Murray and Marshall, and then 2 picks before me, Murray went, and then somebody else went, so they were both still there, and I like all of the running backs that were up in that section of the draft were all the guys that I'm so far down on that I didn't want any piece of. And I'm really high on Marshall, so I ended up taking Marshall and Forte, which I hate saying that I did, going back-to-back Jets picks, and it wasn't even being a homer. I just think those are going to be the 2 crucial spots, but like just doing it made me feel dirty. So I'm not the biggest fan of how things worked out. We'll see. I have a few trade pieces I can work around. I actually went my first 10 picks without taking anything but a running back or a wide receiver. I'm running with the Kirk Cousins and RG3 quarterback duo. See if I can get some junk time points out of RG3. I talk a lot about junk time on the Fantasy Football podcast. So we'll see what happens. Took a lot of risk, but sometimes that's what you have to do in fantasy.
Uh-huh.
Certainly. Are y'all going to talk about like when to do a trade, when not to do a trade?
Yeah, I mean, we hope to start getting some feedback from the audience and the listeners, and any questions. Hoping to get people asking which side of trades that we would like to go on. I'm sure we'll break down the F2M league on that one and break down trades and stuff. So yeah, we're hoping to get some questions and content from the audience. I mean, any questions that you guys have, we are more than welcome to answer.
Well, yeah, because I'm always one. I usually don't even do trades because it's like, man, I don't know, when it's good, when it's not, and I'd rather just go with the guys I drafted and hawk the waiver wire, So.
Yeah, but I'm a little different. I love trades.
Me too.
To me, it makes the game more fun. I mean, you're thinking I got the better end of the deal, and then the other guy gets it, and you're like, man, yeah, well, good for him, bad for me. So I think it's the excitement of it.
Yeah,
and then the only time I did a trade last year was to make sure I got Calvin Johnson back, and then I got screwed. So.
No, I absolutely love trading. I think it's a crucial part of the fantasy experience. A good buddy of mine and I will sit there like texting each other back and forth for over an hour, just trade deal after trade deal, and then nothing will ever get done because I mean we're both just we can't find the middle. But just the negotiation parts and then the arguing, it was like, that's not even a fair trade. What are you doing? Stop trying to rip me off. I know what I'm talking about here. It's just that back and forth. That's what makes fantasy fun to me is not just the trash talking, but the crazy negotiations that go along with some trade talk.
Gary has a friend that's just sneaky about it. He'll just send you a trade and hope you're dumb, and we'll take his trade, knowing that he knows he's going to get the better end of the deal. Gary knows what I'm talking about. But
yeah, well, he doesn't always screw you over. Sometimes you end up getting the better end of the deal. Like I said, sometimes he thinks he's being sneaky, but ends up you are. So sometimes I take his.
I just always find it funny. Like I'm just like, oh, he sent me. Let me see. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah. So now we have done exactly what I try not to do with these things. But hey, the situation presented itself. So let's get on with this. Let's do this Southeastern Conference preview. This is, Last Word on Sports has 2 college football department heads, actually. We've had Tony Syracuse on twice, and this is the first time that we've had Mike Loveall on. He is a Tennessee Volunteers fan, but, I mean, he does a great job of covering almost pretty much everything in college football for them. But here he is helping preview the SEC. And then, of course, after this about 40-minute interview, we will give our standings on the SEC. And that'll be all we're doing on this show. So, all right, everybody, here we go. Hello, and I'm here with Mike Loveall, the college football department head at Last Word on Sports. Mike, why don't you explain to people kind of what you do, and the site's going through this big transition of kind of going into smaller sites as well. Like, what's that all about?
Yeah, Sean, first off, thanks for having me on Football to the Max. Big fan of the show. Great work you guys do there. Like you said, I'm one of the 2 department heads for Last Word on College Football, the college football department at lastwordonsports.com, and we're soon transitioning to lastwordoncollegefootball.com. We'd love to have your listeners reach out and read some of our articles and see our site. We're going to kind of a network site. Last Word on Sports covers all different kinds of sports to include college football. But they're going to be a hub site, and we're going to launch Last Word on College Football, and we're going to cover at our site. We're going to cover college football exclusively. We're really excited. We're growing. We're expanding. We're bringing on new writers, and we're growing and expanding our coverage as well. So if any of your listeners out there have ever wanted to give writing about college football a try, feel free to visit our site. Please visit our site and read up. We got a Write For Us section. And reach out to us. Let us know if you can write and you have a good analysis and good opinions about college football. We'd love to hear from you. So that's kind of what's going on at Last Word on Sports and lastwordoncollegefootball.com. Like I said, we're growing and expanding, and we always love working with Football to the Max.
Well, we appreciate working with you guys too, and it's in the year or so that I've been part of the site. I mean, you guys are great community of people, and you don't just treat people just as like, oh, okay, you guys write and stuff. You guys treat people like family, and I always appreciate that.
So we do appreciate that.
So I mean, for people that maybe you didn't watch so much of the SEC last year, but you're intrigued by some storylines that are going on this year, or just it's back on top. So now you're into that bandwagon watching the top teams. What is the lay of the land sort of for the SEC coming into this season that's maybe different than last year?
Well, I think the biggest storyline is there's lots of questions around the conference this year, and that starts with quarterback. A lot of questions at quarterback. You really only have 2 solid returning starters, Chad Kelly at Ole Miss and Joshua Dobbs at Tennessee. To highlight this, the preseason 4th-team quarterback was Jacob Eason, a true freshman at Georgia who hasn't even taken a college football snap, and he's already 4th-team SEC. That's how big of a question mark we have at quarterback in the conference. So that's the first big question mark. And then the second question mark is the SEC going to continue to live up to its hype as far as competition amongst the interconferences? Of course, they had a tremendous bowl season last year. The only 2 losses were Texas A&M on a last quarter loss to Louisville and Nashville, and of course Florida being drubbed by Michigan. Other than that, all the teams from the conference won their games, and of course Alabama won the national championship. It's going to be hard to match that. But if you look at the first week of the season with those games, Alabama, USC, Ole Miss, Florida State, Auburn, Clemson, LSU, Wisconsin, Texas A&M, UCLA, and Georgia, North Carolina, just off the top of my head, there's a good chance that the SEC doesn't reach 500 in those first week games. And then you're going to start asking, is this a down year for the SEC? And if you look at all the schedules this year, a lot of the matchups, a lot of the interconference matchups that SEC teams have, they're not equal. They're not kind of the teams are at the same echelon in their conference. So Auburn, Clemson's a perfect example of that. Auburn is not the top of their division. Clemson is clearly at the top of their division. So you got to think that Clemson's going to win that game. So the numbers might indicate that the SEC might be looking at a down year. And so that's the second biggest question. How is the SEC going to fare with a very, what I would consider a very unfavorable schedule as far as interconference matchups? And then the third big question is, can they continue this momentum? If you look at the West, for 2 straight years, they've sent all 7 teams to bowls. You look at Mississippi State without Dak Prescott. You look at Arkansas without their top 2 returning rushers and Brandon Allen, who I think was probably the most important quarterback in the conference last year. And then you look at all the questions at Texas A&M. Is the SEC West going to continue to be the toughest division in college football, sending all 7 teams to the bowls, or will a division like the Big Ten East with Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, and Penn State, will they kind of assume that role as the best division in college football. So the big narrative around the conference is all these question marks. Usually when we come into the conference season, or usually when we come into the football season, the SEC is a little bit more solid. You kind of have a lot more known commodities. This year, a lot of talent. The SEC always has a lot of talent, but there's a lot less known commodities around the conference.
I mean, and then just looking at sort of going through what people are predicting and everything, it seems like the top two almost seem to be set from on paper, but you never know with the SEC. And one of the teams that I've seen like just kind of been going up in recent years is Tennessee, and they seem to be kind of penciled in for that winning the East after a lot of years of kind of being below Georgia and Florida. Is that kind of how it is? Tennessee should be the clear number one?
Yeah, and just for everyone's knowledge, I have a little bit of proximity bias. I'm a Tennessee guy. That's the team that I watch. That's the team I grew up watching. Just to put that out there. But Tennessee should win the East. They have the talent, and more importantly, they have the depth of talent. So Tennessee, I think on paper, is definitely the favorite in the East. You look at the East, there's really three teams: Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida. The winner of the East should be one of those three teams. I think Georgia's a little bit underrated, and Florida's one of those teams, again, with question marks. Luke Del Rio named the starter. How are they going to do? But I think one of those three teams. If you look at Tennessee, on paper, they should be the East winner. They've got Joshua Dobbs, the second best returning quarterback. If he can develop a vertical passing game with those wide receivers, that offense is going to be incredibly potent. You've got the rushing attack is going to be historically good for Tennessee with Jalen Hurd, Alvin Kamara, which is the prototypical NFL third down back with that speed, and Joshua Dobbs, who is a great running quarterback. The defense returns 9 of the 11 starters, including Derek Barnett, All-American candidate, and Jalen Reeves-Maben at linebacker, who's also an All-American candidate, and Cameron Sutton, also an All-American candidate in the secondary. So they are evenly distributed with talent from the front to the back. So that defense has a good chance to be very good as well. And Bob Shoop, Butch Jones brought in defensive coordinator from Bob Shoop from Penn State, and he is recognized universally across college football as one of the top defensive coordinators. Very aggressive. So Tennessee on paper looks like a strong candidate to win the East. But again, Georgia and Florida, I think, are legitimate contenders as well.
Georgia brings in a new coach in Kirby Smart, and as you mentioned, they already have having to figure out with the quarterback. What does Kirby Smart bring to the team that maybe they were missing with Mark Richt?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. All Mark Richt did was win 10 games in the season. I think what Kirby Smart brings in is a little bit more energy, a little bit more up-tempo kind of style. Even for a defensive guy, he brings that energy and up-tempo kind of style. The other thing he brings is a systemic approach. When you work under Nick Saban, you look at these guys who have worked under Nick Saban and went to other programs to coach. Nick Saban's all about the process. And if you look at Nick Saban's last 10 years at Alabama, and it's really unfair to Kirby Smart to keep talking about Nick Saban when you talk about Kirby Smart, but if you look at Saban's 10 years at Alabama, that they just continue to win and they continue to get in championship games every year, and it's all about the system. So what Kirby Smart brings is the potential to implement a system at Georgia that gets them at the championship level every year, which is what Saban has done for the past decade at Alabama. So he brings energy and he brings the experience in the Saban system, which is what every program is looking to replicate. And so that's what he brings. He's a fantastic defensive coordinator. Again, he brings a little bit new energy. That's really what the knock on Rick was at Georgia. Great guy. Everybody liked him. Everybody enjoyed the 10 wins, but they just never could get to the championship level. And fans at Georgia think Kirby Smart has the ability to bring in just one or two more guys and turn the energy up just one or two more levels to get past that 10-win plateau and start competing at the championship level.
Yeah, so, you mentioned Florida kind of being that third team. Second year Jim McElwain, they decide to go with the transfer instead of sticking with Trayon Harris. What did they kind of give a big reason why Del Rio's kind of chosen as a starter instead of sticking with the guy they've had?
Well, I'm not down in Gainesville. What I think Del Rio brings is, one, a little bit better arm. Two, he's probably a little bit more consistent. He's probably just the better quarterback. And if you look at Florida, what they're looking for is consistency and the ability to move the ball. Luke Del Rio doesn't have to be Chad Kelly. He doesn't have to be any of the great quarterbacks of Florida past. He doesn't have to be Tim Tebow. He doesn't have to be Jesse Palmer or any of those guys. He doesn't have to throw for 350 yards a game. With the defense they have in Gainesville, all Luke Del Rio needs to do is get 3 or 4 first downs per drive, get the ball out to Brandon Powell, get it out to Antonio Callaway if he's able to play this season, and distribute the ball to his receivers. There's a lot of talent in Florida. There's always going to be talent in Florida, just like USC or Alabama, Florida State. Those teams are always going to have talent. Even when they have question marks, they're going to have talent. So I just think that Del Rio, his skill set is much more consistent and much more solid in his ability to get the ball to playmakers regularly and let them do their job. You saw Harris last year when he was able to get the ball to Callaway. They were successful. What killed Harris's performance last year was just a complete lack of consistency.
So of the other sort of teams below this first tier here, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Missouri, and South Carolina, who has Will Muschamp going from Florida to South Carolina after Steve Spurrier finally retired. Of those 4, is there any of those do you think could kind of surprise, or you're looking at to say maybe you need to watch out for that team?
Well, Kentucky has been a team that for the last 3 years, ever since Stoops has been at Kentucky, they've been a team that everybody says this is the year they're going to make that leap from the bottom 4 to the top 3. But I think people are starting to kind of lose faith in Kentucky. They do bring back almost their entire offense. They'll have a new quarterback. They bring back a little bit of their defense. I think the defense is going to be what kills them this year. When you look at their schedule, they draw Alabama out of the West. They have their traditional West rivalry with Mississippi State, who's still a decent team even without Dak Prescott. They've had the 2 crushing losses. 2 years ago, they started out 5-0. They finished 5-7. They lost the last 7 in a row to keep them out of a bowl. Similar situation last year where they needed that last win to get to a bowl. They missed it. Those have been crushing. If you have a team like Kentucky who's trying to get to that next level, those extra 20 practices between your last game and your bowl game are crucial for a young team. Kentucky has a chance to get to 6 or 7 wins, and they have a chance to have an upset. But I'm just kind of starting to lose faith in Mark Stoops after the last 2 seasons. The other team I think that could surprise is South Carolina. If you looked at them last year, they had an impressive win over North Carolina. I mean, the performance wasn't impressive, but the fact that they beat the division champion out of the ACC in retrospect was impressive. If you look at all their losses, they lost to Kentucky by 4. I mean, they had a bad season, 3-9, but they lost to Kentucky by 4. They lost to Vanderbilt by 9, 1 score against A&M, 10 points to Florida, and of course they lost to the Citadel, and they only lost to Clemson by 5. So they're a team that was 3-9 last year, but could have very easily been 5-7 or 6-6, which still isn't great, but it's better than 3-9. So I think with Muschamp coming in, I don't think this is the year where he's going to make a drastic improvement, but I do think they can be significantly better. I think they can get to 5 wins, maybe. But I think you'll see some market improvement on the field, and they do have the potential to have 1 or 2 upsets during the season. As far as Vanderbilt and Missouri go, I don't think they're going to be a surprise team. I just don't see the depth of talent on either one of those teams for them to make a run at anything, and both of them have serious question marks at quarterback.
Well, in the West, or before we get to switching to the divisions, you don't have to give me a record, but what are your
Sean,
1 through 7? You hear me? Hello? Hello? Oh, hold on. Sorry, I forgot that there was that little error in there. While I try to find the actual part where, how about this? We just do our standings now while I try to find this little error here. and then you guys can just listen to the rest of the interview. Hold on, guys. So, what do you think about the SEC here? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the SEC is definitely, one of those conferences that you get excited about talking about. And, man, I think I have a few of these in order. But, Randy, do you have your list in front of you that you kind of think that you want to kind of list out here?
Honestly, I'm working on it as we speak. I could tell you who I have winning.
Me too.
Yay,
Alabama.
technical difficulties.
Yeah, yay. So Alabama is always the one that you got to look at in the SEC as the team to beat. I mean, is that who you had winning this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's between Alabama and LSU, both from the West. But I think the East is still, to me, second tier. Like, they're improving. I like Tennessee a lot this year as far as becoming more competition. Georgia and Florida are always right around there, but nothing really is at the level of what Alabama and LSU are going into this year. I think either of them are easily playoff contenders. Even, it could be that controversial deal this year where one of them wins the SEC, the other one, just misses out of winning the division, but still is consideration for that top four.
No, I totally agree with you on that. I mean, there's a lot of good points there, and I want to agree with you on Tennessee. Tennessee was a team that, I mean, my goodness, I mean, we keep talking about Oklahoma. I mean, Tennessee almost beat Oklahoma last year, and a few other teams that they just would have had some last minute, adjustments. They would have been a really solid team. They just kind of fell short at times. So that's a team that I think this year comes into play and makes a lot of noise. And of course, LSU, you mentioned them as well. They're always right there with Alabama for the most part. They give them a hard time. Last year they had a really good running game. It kind of fell off at the end of the year. But for a while there, they had such a good running game that you just thought, who can stop these guys? Who can do it? And eventually it did happen. But some really solid teams.
Can I just say that thank you very much, SEC, for making September 3rd a must-see college football day to really kick off the college football season. Have you seen the 5 games that the SEC will be a part of?
It's ridiculously awesome.
I mean, for those that don't know, we'll just run through just because it's fun and letting Sean get things figured out real quick. Alabama and USC.
Set, but go ahead.
Okay, but so Alabama and USC. All right. How do you get better than that? How about Clemson and Auburn? I mean, I know Auburn is not the same team as they were, but 2 national runner-ups over the last 3 years going head-to-head. LSU going to Wisconsin, playing in Green Bay. Texas A&M going up against UCLA. And Georgia and North Carolina. I mean, just those 5 games could lead a weekend, and they're all happening on the same day, all involving the same conference. So, SEC, thank you very much for... Yes, they do play their powder puffs, but so many of these teams are going, okay, we're going to at least play one really, really tough out-of-conference schedule game, and it's going to be September 3rd, and I will have my butt on my couch ready to watch all these games.
Yeah, that first weekend is going to be crazy, and you got a Monday game that's interesting. You got Notre Dame and Texas on that Sunday. So everybody's going to have their butts glued to everything. I know Gary's going to be totally waiting for that Sunday game with Texas and Notre Dame.
I cannot wait.
So what we'll do here is, since we don't normally do it this way, since pretty much we cut off right when we were done with the SEC East and we're going to go with the West, let's go ahead and give our standings for the East, and then when we finish with the interview for the West, we'll do our standings for the West. So,
sure.
SECs, how do you see that playing out?
All right, well, I'll go ahead and go first, I guess. I have Tennessee as the number one team. Josh Dobbs is an excellent quarterback, and I think he's going to be able to shred some of these really tough defenses in the SEC. Speaking of defenses, I like Florida at second. That defense is great down there, and the offense is nothing to slack at now. I mean, it's been rough the last few years, but I really think they're going to take another step or two forward. I have Georgia in third. We'll go South Carolina fourth, Missouri fifth, and then who do I want last? Let's go Kentucky sixth and Vanderbilt seventh.
Okay, so my standings are at the top, it's exactly kind of like Randy here. I had Tennessee. Tennessee's that team, like I said, they had a lot of potential. I've heard some people say, oh, you're overrating them. No, I don't know. I have a hard time believing we're overrating them too much. Florida is not the same Florida you remember, but they're still good. They still have some team pride. They still got some guys on there that are going to make a lot of noise as well. So I think Florida's a great number 2 team. Of course, I got Georgia at number 3 as well, but I'm also kind of partial to Georgia, so I'm always going to rank them high. My number 4 has to be South Carolina. I really like them too. Our guest here was kind of giving some in-depth analysis on them, but I agree with a lot of things he said. And so that leaves me with number 5, and I'm going to have to give number 5 to Missouri. Sorry, Mickey Spagnola. Just got to give him that. And, of course, I'm going to give Kentucky, and then I'll go Vanderbilt last.
All right. I'm going to go with the trifecta of Tennessee winning the East. I'm going to go with Georgia second, Florida third, Kentucky fourth, South Carolina fifth, Missouri sixth, and Vanderbilt last. So those are our standings for the SEC East. So here is the rest of the interview with Mike Loveall, College Football Department Head for Last Word on Sports. Here we go. Okay. So before we get into switching the divisions, you don't have to give me a record or anything, but what are your 1 through 7 standings for the East?
Okay, this is how I see the East playing. I think Tennessee's going to win the East. I do think it'll be close. I think they might have 2 losses. I see them losing to Alabama and possibly tripping up against Georgia. That Georgia's a classic trap game coming off Florida. I think Georgia's going to finish second. I think it's going to be close. I think they'll probably have 2 losses, 2 to Ole Miss and Auburn, and then maybe 1 somewhere else. I think Florida finished third, and then I think I have the bottom 4 is Missouri, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and South Carolina. So that's how I see the East.
So moving on to the West, it seems like you have sort of Alabama by itself, maybe LSU, like right there nipping at its heels, and an Ole Miss kind of having to come back from losing some big stars to the NFL. And then you kind of have everybody else. Is that how it is for you in the West, just those 3?
That's what it looks like to me. I have Alabama on top again. I've been burned a couple of times the past couple of years saying, hey, this might be the year where Alabama struggles, and they might struggle to get to 10 wins, and they just keep winning. So until Alabama shows that they really are struggling, I'm not going to bet against them. They've earned that. LSU is very intriguing. They return a lot of talent. They're a team that, much like I talked about early on in the podcast, where there's question marks, but they're deep with talent, particularly on their defense. I think they're going to have a great defense. They bring in Aranda from Wisconsin, who I think is going to take that talent and really turn it into another one of those great LSU defenses. Of course, they've got Leonard Fournette, who is a known commodity. I talked earlier about there's a lot of unknown commodities. Leonard Fournette is as known of a commodity as you can get in college football. A tremendous runner, had 2,000 yards in the season last year. And just a fantastic, great athlete. He's got it all: size, speed, moves, and he's a tough kid. The big question mark for LSU is going to be Brandon Harris. Had a 53.8% completion rate last year. If he can get that up, if he can get close to 60%, and he can get the ball out to Trayvon Durrell and Malachi Dupree, that offense has a chance to really improve on what I would call kind of a lethargic 2015, particularly down the stretch. Down the stretch, they scored 16, 14, 17, 19 in their last 4 games. That's not gonna get you much in the SEC West. So again, a lot of talent. I think if Brandon Harris can get that completion percentage up to 60%, I think LSU has a chance to win the West. I see those 2 teams up top. Again, that Alabama-LSU game is going to be a great game and probably decide the division. Ole Miss, best quarterback coming back, I think, hands down, Chad Kelly. But you're right, they lost a ton of talent, particularly on the defensive side, to the NFL draft. So I think they're going to kind of struggle to stay where they're at. But I think they'll probably finish 3rd or 4th in the division. I think Texas A&M has a fantastic chance to get up there and compete for the division title. Again, going back to the quarterback narrative, it really depends on how well Trevor Knight is able to come in, learn that system. Of course, he played at Oklahoma. Kevin Sumlin was at Oklahoma for a while as well. How well he's able to come in and learn that system and execute that offense. They have a ridiculous amount of talent at wide receiver. If you look at Speedy Noel, Christian Kirk, and Josh Reynolds, and Ricky Seals-Jones, those 4 wide receivers. Speedy Noel is kind of disappointed at his time there, but he has that talent. Those other 3 receivers have had fantastic years. Christian Kirk over 1,000 yards last year. Josh Reynolds over 900 yards last year. Just fantastic numbers from those guys with kind of inconsistent quarterback play as well. So they have the talent on offense to put up some points, and we know that. They return their top 5 tacklers and All-American Myles Garrett on the defensive line. Dylan Mack as well, and then a pretty solid linebacking core. If John Chavis can get that defense playing at a level commensurate to their talent, they could have a pretty good defense as well. If they get a good defensive effort with the talent they have on offense, they could make a run at the division title as well. I don't think they will, but I do think that A&M might even sneak up to that 3rd spot in the division. I'm looking at A&M having 8 wins. We'll know early because that matchup, that opening week matchup with UCLA in College Station, will show us a lot about if this team is ready to play at a top level this year.
Hey, you said
then,
there's a. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You said there's a narrative about the quarterback thing. I mean, there seems to be this other narrative with Texas A&M of Kevin Sumlin sort of being having a lot of pressure, being on the hot seat, if you will, of if the team doesn't perform well this season with all the talent you just talked about, he's going to be in trouble. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk in College Station. A lot of people aren't happy. It's not so much about the wins. 8 wins last year. Of course, they had success under Johnny Manziel. They had a rough offseason. They lost the 2 quarterbacks early on in the offseason, even before the bowl game. And then they had the public relations disaster with the coaches clinic with female fans. And they've had some drama on the recruiting trail as well. The pressure on someone is not so much from the on-field performance because people understand that A&M is playing in the best division in college football. So to get 8 wins in the SEC West is really good. Obviously it's not going to win the division, but it's still a pretty solid effort. The hot seat for Sumlin is kind of people questioning his ability to run that program and to maintain where it's historically been a pretty proud program and a pretty reputable program as well. So the off-field drama I think is really what's fueling the fire of the hot seat that Kevin Sumlin's on.
I mean, so you were transparent earlier about Tennessee. The listeners of this podcast know this. We talk about it quite often, but just for transparency's sake, I am a Arkansas person, born there, lived there for 5 years. Half my family is from there, so we're all about the Hogs. And not to put any pressure on you, but how do you think that Arkansas is going to do?
Arkansas is another one of those teams that I just think has a lot of question marks. If you go back to last season, I kind of referenced this earlier, I think Brandon Allen was probably, I think he was definitely the most important quarterback in the league, if not the best. His numbers last year were fantastic all across the board. His completion percentage was great. His yardage was great. His touchdown to interception rate was great. And his downfield vertical passing was fantastic, which enabled which enabled Cody Walker and Raleigh Williams to rack up. Which enabled Alex Collins and Cody Walker to have success, particularly Alex Collins. So they lose Brendan Allen. How good is Austin Allen going to be? We don't know. How good is that running back Williams going to be? We don't know. And they're replacing 3 of their 5 linemen. So we really don't know. I work with Chad Neefling at FTC Breakdown. He writes for We're Down Now. He's talking a lot about how much improved their defense is. They bring back 9 starters on defense. So I think Arkansas's defense is going to be pretty good. If they can kind of hold some of those teams down, and Austin Allen can do a little bit of what his big brother did last year, Arkansas has a chance, I think, to be in that 3, 4, 5, 6 range. I don't think they can challenge Alabama or LSU just because of talent across the board. But I do think they have a chance to compete against Ole Miss, Auburn, A&M for that 3, 4, 5, 6 spot. I kind of see those 4 teams, Ole Miss, Auburn, A&M, and Arkansas, kind of battling for 3, 4, 5, 6. So I mean, again, Arkansas is one of those teams that has question marks, the biggest one of which is at quarterback. And so I think that's their range, somewhere between 3rd in the division and 6th in the division.
Yeah, that seems totally fair. I mean, what Brett Bielema has been able to do with them to kind of turn them around after that whole scandal with Petrino, I mean, it's been really good. I'm not one of those that's going crazy expecting them to topple these teams that are way better than them. Just glad to hear, that people have a little faith. Just, Austin Allen, we don't know what's there with him, so we got to see him play first, and if he can be anything like his brother, then that's obviously a plus for the team. Anything?
You hit on it. You hit on it. What someone in Bielema and Mullen face is they're all good coaches, and those are all good programs with good players. But in that division, it's not just about being better. It's about getting better than the other 6 teams. And every team in that division, every coach in that division is operating at a high level. So it's not just about you getting better. What someone in Bielema and Mullen face is about not only getting better, but getting better enough to get ahead of one of these other 6 teams that are really good too. So it's a tremendous challenge for Bielema, Mullen, and someone to build programs that can consistently operate at that high level in that division, because all 7 teams are so competitive. So people talk oftentimes about believing in Brett Bielema. I don't think anybody doesn't believe in Brett Bielema. I think it's just very hard for a coach at one of those schools, A&M, Arkansas, Mississippi State, to get over the other 6 teams who are really good in that division.
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, it's just, you have Alabama's and LSU's that they can almost get any player they want. And then, and that doesn't even include, the teams in the East that also have that name power and the coaches and everything. And it's like, wow, just what they're able to do every year that's a big deal, like you said. Go ahead.
So oftentimes it's not so much about, when I slot a team like A&M or Arkansas in the 4, 5, or 6 position, it's not so much about Arkansas and Brett Bielema as it is about the other 6 teams. One of those 7 teams, I mean, for 2 years in a row, they've sent all 7 teams to the bowls. One of those teams has to be in the 7th slot. You can't put them all in the 3rd and 4th slot, So depending on who I put in that 4, 5, 6, 7 spot, I always get some feedback from fans. And I tell them it's not necessarily about Arkansas or Bielema. It's not necessarily about Mississippi State and Mullen. It's about the other 6 teams in that division.
Yeah, certainly. And, I mean, one of those other teams we haven't quite talked about yet. I mean, Gus Malzahn has that big year the first time he's there. Then the team has kind of gone down every season. What do you expect out of them?
Yeah, Auburn's the one team where I just don't know. And that's what I tell people when they ask me about Auburn. I just don't know. They named Sean White the starter this week, just 2 days ago. I think, again, going back to the Luke Del Rio question at Florida, what I think Sean White provides to Auburn is stability. You kind of know what he is. He's a known commodity. I think John Franklin III. Most of your listeners have probably seen Last Chance U. The guy has explosive athletic ability, great runner. I just don't know that his passing is consistent enough to give Auburn a chance to win against teams with defenses like Clemson, LSU, and A&M. They play all three of those teams the first 4 weeks of the season. So John Franklin III is a great athlete, but when 3 of your first 4 games were against Clemson, a John Chavis defense in Texas A&M, and LSU, a guy who isn't prepared, a guy who doesn't understand the system, and a guy who's not consistent is not the guy you want going against those 3 defenses. With Auburn, there's a lot of heat with Malzahn. 12 wins his first season. I believe 8 wins, 9 or 8 or 9 wins his second season, and 7 wins last year. He got that 7th win in the bowl game against Memphis. I think some of the luster might be rubbing off of the Malzahn magic. If you look at that first season, they won a lot of close games late. They had the tip pass. They had the Ole Miss result in 13 where the Ole Miss guy hurts himself going into the end zone on the last play of the game. Of course, they beat Alabama by one score on the kick six. So they came kind of back down to average in 14 with 8 wins. And some of those close games that they won in 2013, they did win in 2014. Specifically, the Mississippi State game, A&M by 3 points. And then last year they kind of retrograded even a little bit more with a 6-6 regular season. I really think that if Malzahn, I'm not sure they have a lot more patience with Malzahn in Auburn. The whole Gus Malzahn, Will Muschamp thing did not work well last year. No animosity. They just never meshed. Rhett Lashley, offensive coordinator, a lot of Auburn fans aren't big fans of him. And Rhett Lashley, and Gus Malzahn is tied to Rhett Lashley. He's not going to get rid of him. If Jay Jacobs were to tell him he had to get rid of Rhett Lashley, Malzahn would leave as well. So unless Malzahn's going to be on the hot seat unless he gets 8 wins. And I'm not sure that Auburn's willing to invest much more in Gus Malzahn if he can't get to 8 wins. So, so I think the seat is hottest for Gus Malzahn, and they just have so many question marks. Another new defensive coordinator, Kevin Steele, who's leaving LSU and coming over to Auburn. I'm not sure he's going to be working with not as much talent at Auburn as he was with LSU, so I'm not sure they're going to get that much better. So I think there's just a lot of questions with Auburn. They have the talent to compete for that 4 or 5 slot, but I see them getting 7 wins, which I think is going to be very frustrating for Auburn fans because with 7 wins, you're trying to do we keep Malzahn? Do we move on from Malzahn? I think it's going to be another frustrating season for Auburn fans.
All right, so what are your 1 through 7 in the West?
So I'm looking at Alabama winning the West, LSU also winning the West. Alabama winning the West, LSU coming in second. I think it's really a 2-team race. I have Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M is going to surprise. I think they'll finish 3rd. Ole Miss, I think, will finish 4th. Auburn, 5th. Arkansas, 6th. Both of those teams, I think, are looking at anywhere between 5 and 7 and 7 and 5. And then a Mississippi State at 7th. I think losing Dak Prescott is really going to hurt the Mississippi State offense. Again, I think 1 and 2 are pretty clear. I think it's going to be Alabama, LSU. I believe that pretty firmly. I think that, like I said earlier, I think that 3, 4, 5, 6 slot between A&M, Ole Miss, Auburn, Arkansas, I really think that's how I have them slated now. But I think any of those 4 teams could finish in any of those 4 slots. And then I think I'm also pretty confident that Mississippi State will finish 7th. And I think this will probably be the first time in 3 years the West doesn't send all 7 teams to a bowl game.
Any chance Alabama goes undefeated?
Yes, there's a chance. There's always a chance. If Jalen Hurts comes in and he can be a consistent passer, all he has to do is get that ball to O.J. Howard over the middle and distribute it out to Calvin Ridley, for first downs, and then take the occasional and just be occasionally successful downfield with Calvin Ridley. Well, I think it's going to be Hurts. Or if Cooper Bateman comes in, if he can do the same thing, that defense is going to be good enough, as it always is. That offense will be good enough to win. Do I think they'll go undefeated? I don't think they will. I think they're going to trip up somewhere. But do they have the chance to be undefeated? Absolutely.
Well, you got Tennessee and Alabama in the championship game. Who you got winning?
I do. I have Tennessee and Alabama championship game. Of course, they meet in the regular season as well. They are permanent opponents, going back to their third Saturday in October traditional rivalry, one of the more underappreciated rivalries in college football. So that would be a replay of the regular season. Anytime you're looking at conference championship game, a game in December, you're looking at health. I think both teams have depth at talent, but what I think might make the difference is the Alabama teams. If you're a senior on the Alabama team, you've played in so many either SEC championship games or college football playoff games that you know how it works. You know the feeling. Nothing's going to be new. You've played in Atlanta. If you're an Alabama senior, you've played in Atlanta probably 4 or 5 times, if I had to guess off the top of my head, just either in opening weekend games or SEC championship or big-time games. So I think experience makes a difference there. I think it's a close game, but I think Alabama comes away with it.
I mean, how far? Obviously, Alabama would be going to the playoff unless they lose a lot of games. Do you have them at least making it to the title game?
It depends on who they draw. I think a one-loss SEC champion always gets in, or at least gets in under the current environment. So I think Alabama is going to definitely be in the college football playoffs. I think this might be a year where you see 2 teams out of the ACC. I think Clemson and Florida State are really good. If you look at the way their schedules line up, they have a chance. Both of them play Louisville, so they can both beat Louisville. If Louisville beats Houston, that makes Louisville probably a top 15 team unless they stumble elsewhere. So Clemson and FSU can build their resume by beating Louisville. Let's see, Clemson plays Auburn and South Carolina, if I'm correct. They play both of those teams, so they can build that resume of 2 wins against SEC teams. Which, of course, if Auburn doesn't have a good season in South Carolina, then that's not a big thing. But just to say that another conference team beat 2 SEC teams kind of plays into that anti-SEC narrative, which is around the country. And then Florida plays Ole Miss, Florida State plays Ole Miss and Florida. If they win both those games, those are 2 top-tier SEC schools. So if they win those 2 games plus that win against Florida, as long as Florida State and Clemson only have a loss, only one of them has a loss to the other, I think you could see both of those teams getting in. And I think those are probably the 2 best teams in the country, to be honest with you. Now, having said that, so that's 3 teams right there. I don't think Notre Dame's going to compete for the championship. You look at the Big Ten, you got to think there's probably going to be a one-loss Big Ten champion. So that's probably a solid 4th team. So I think you'd have to have, for Florida State and Clemson both to get in, I think you'll probably have a Pac-12 winner with 2 losses. And I really think there's going to be a lot of confusion and chaos in the Big 12 this year. And so I think you might see a 1-loss Oklahoma win that, or possibly a 2-loss Oklahoma win that conference. And so I think the wild card there is the Big 12. I think the committee's going to have to make a decision between a 1-loss Florida State or a 1-loss Clemson, and either a 1-loss Big 12 champion or possibly a 2-loss Big 12 champion. So going back to your question about Alabama, I don't think they'll be able to make it past Florida State or Clemson. I think those are the 2 best teams in the country. So I think they'll be in the playoffs, but I don't think they're going to repeat as champions.
You mentioned some players here in there talking about the teams, but what's a player do you think maybe is a little bit under the radar that we could be talking about at season's end? Like, oh man, this guy plays in the SEC and here's another big star for them.
A guy that's under the radar. Well, I think Trevor Knight, if you look at what's surrounding him, They're at A&M with that. I mean, just they are a ridiculous amount of talent at wide receiver. Trevor Knight could have a season of redemption. I don't know how many people know about Bo Scarborough. He's going to be the number one back at Alabama. Tremendous talent. Everybody who's seen him practice raves about him. Again, he's an unknown commodity on game day. So we'll see about that. I'm a big fan. I think he's going to have a breakout season. We'll see about that. And you know who else? I don't know why I think this, but you know who else I think might be a surprise player this year is Brandon Harris. He's got a decent arm. He's been kind of, I wouldn't say ridiculed. He's been heavily critiqued in his starting time there at LSU. But if he can get things figured out, and he has a great defense, he has a great offensive line, and an all-world running back. That's everything a quarterback could ask for. I think if he just kind of gets in the zone and kind of believes in his arm, I think you could see Brandon Harris have a tremendous year. So that's Trevor Knight, that's Brandon Harris, Bo Scarborough. Let's see if anybody else comes off the top of my head. On the defensive side, I don't know that Kendall Beckwith would be a surprise to anybody. Tony Connor out of LSU, I think coming off an injury, he might surprise people with how good he is. Minka Fitzpatrick is not going to surprise anybody. And so I'll just go down to what I know. I think Todd Kelly Jr. at strong safety for Tennessee might be maybe a big surprise on the defensive side of the ball. So those are kind of the guys, just off the top of my head, that I think people might not know their name, but might know their name at the end of the season.
Anybody for the SEC for the Heisman race, you think that's?
Yeah, well, I think Leonard Fournette will be up there. Nick Chubb has a chance. He had a ridiculous stat line for the first 4 or 5 games before he got hurt last year. I think Chad Kelly may make a run. I think he'll be able to put up some numbers. But I think as far as the Heisman goes, you'll probably see Leonard Fournette as the top SEC guy.
All right, Mike. You've answered all of our questions here. I want to thank you so much for helping us out and giving us an awesome SEC preview.
Well, Sean, like I said, really appreciate you having me on Football Mats, and would love for your listeners to come by lastwordoncollegefootball.com. Check us out. Follow me on Mike_L_LWOS. That's my Twitter account, and I really appreciate you guys having me on.
All right, Mike. Well, you have a good day. All right, guys. Now we got to just pick the SEC West.
All right. Randy went first a while ago. I guess I should go, first this time. I think me and Randy kind of talked about this briefly. Alabama is the team to beat here. I think they're tops. LSU is a close second. I mean, they always are in a battle. It's just hard for me not to go and pick, anybody but LSU, but not by number 2. Number 3, is a little bit more interesting. We kind of figure out where you want to go on this one. And, there's a team that sticks out to me, and he made a good point in his conversation about Texas A&M. I think they're a team that has added a lot of talent in the past, and it's yet to really shine the way it needs to. I think this could be the year they shine a little bit here and really make some noise in this, conference. And then I have to go and look at some of these other teams and kind of determine where I really think they're going to fall. I think Auburn is my number 4. I think that they always kind of find a way to do some good things for themselves. Arkansas has to be my number 5. I really like the Razorbacks, but I'm not sold right now that they're ready to make that next step and get into the upper echelon. And then from there, I got to go Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is a team that, like you mentioned, lost a lot of players. We'll see where they get here. And then, of course, Mississippi State rounds out the end of this for me.
I'll go from the bottom up. Mississippi State, obviously at the bottom. No Dak Prescott. Lots of changes. They're 7th. I have Arkansas in 6th. Auburn in 5th. Texas A&M in 4th. I like Ole Miss. I know they lost a lot of pieces, but I think Chad Kelly is one of the better quarterbacks in college football, and I think he can get them a few extra wins. So I have them 3rd. And then, of course, you come down to the main 2, Alabama and LSU. Who's going to take it? Alabama probably has is the better team overall. They've won the last 5 meetings between the two, dating back to when they went head-to-head in the national championship game. But you look at the 2 games that were played in Baton Rouge, and Alabama won by 4, and they won in overtime. This year it is in Baton Rouge. And LSU is returning 18 starters from last year. I think Alabama is the better team, but a veteran leadership team in LSU, a team that kind of underperformed at the end of the year after losing to Alabama. I kind of want to go for it, and I will. I will have LSU 1 and Alabama 2.
All right. Wow. Look at Randy going with the not so easy pick. I'm gonna go Alabama going 12-1 and being in first. LSU second. I'm gonna go Ole Miss third. Arkansas at fourth. Texas A&M fifth. Auburn's gonna keep going down in sixth, and Mississippi State seventh. It's possible that all these teams get to bowls though, as they usually do. So Alabama, Tennessee in the SEC championship game. I think Alabama's going to take it again. I kind of hope they don't, but I think they will.
They won't. They won't. LSU will, but that's okay.
Yeah, we'll see. You never know.
So who you got in the Who you got winning the championship game, Gary?
I've got Alabama. Tennessee will not be able to hold on.
All right. Well, that's it. We did all the previews for all the big conferences. Sorry we couldn't do some of the smaller ones. Just people didn't come through and things kept happening. So at least we did the Power 5 and some of the more bigger ones. So there, like I said, on Thursday we'll actually get to talk about some games that have already been played, which is pretty awesome. I think Louisville's playing a game. You have Minnesota playing a game or something against someone. So, yeah, like I think 3 or 4 games on Thursday, then you got a few games on Friday, and then the big slate happens Saturday with games on Sunday and Monday. So on the Thursday night, Friday morning kind of thing, we will for sure be doing a college football week 1 preview. I don't know if we'll be doing anything NFL-wise because we already did all of our NFL previews. I guess we can do a news thing maybe Monday or something, depending on what's going on with that. But, all right. So that does it for this. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Let us know what you think is going to happen with the SEC, and we will see you guys later.